My brothers and sisters, this is a proclamation of the Holy Gospel as we find in the tradition of St. Luke.
Glory to you, Lord.
Well, some of the people were speaking about how the temple was adorned with costly stones and votive offerings. Jesus said, "All that you see here, the days will come when there will be nothing left, not a stone upon another that will not be thrown down." Then they asked him, "Teacher, when will this happen? And what signs will there be when all these things are about to take place?" He answered, "See that you do not be deceived, for many will come in my name, saying, 'I am he,' and the time has come. Do not follow them. When you hear of wars and insurrections, do not be terrified, for such things must happen first, but it will not immediately be the end." Then he said to them, "A nation will rise against nation, kingdoms against kingdoms, and there will be powerful earthquakes, famines, and plagues from place to place. And awesome signs and mighty signs will come from the sky. Before all this happens, however, they will seize and persecute you. They will hand you over to the synagogues and into the prisons, and they will have you led before kings and governors because of my name. It will lead to your giving testimony. Remember, you are not prepared for defense beforehand, for I myself shall give you a wisdom in speaking that all your adversaries will find powerless to resist or to refute. You will be handed over by parents, brothers, relatives, friends, and they will put some of you to death. You will be hated because of my name, but not a hair of your head will be destroyed. By your perseverance, you will secure your lives." My brothers and sisters, this is the good news of our salvation.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
A number of weeks ago, when we got word that our property here had been sold and that this building would be torn down to make room for high-rises, I could not help but think of this passage from Luke's Gospel. "See the beautiful things that you have here, but one day this shall not be. It shall all come to nothing. Not a stone upon a stone." But Jesus doesn't end there. He gives us hope. When we think about what Jesus is doing, he's looking at the temple. They're in this magnificent building that has been the cornerstone of Jewish life since David. David conquered the city of Jerusalem. Now, Jerusalem was not a very large city, but it was well fortified because it sat on top of a mountain. But one of the things that saved the city of Jerusalem was the fact that it had an internal water source. And so an enemy can encamp around this city for years and years and years, and as long as they had enough food, as long as they had enough water, they would be safe. And Jerusalem did have an internal water source. What does that mean? That there was a way of coming down the mountain, not being perceived, to the bottom where there was a stream. And every night the Israelites would go down, and whoever had that city at the time go down. They had enough water, they would bring it back up for the populace to drink. But what happened was David found out about that. And David was able to get his men up through that same tunnel that gave life to the city, and he conquered it. And that's why until today it's called the City of David. But in the middle of this city was a mountain. We might not look at it as a mountain, it was a hill. And this was Mount Zion. It was believed that Abraham was to offer Isaac on this very spot. And when David conquered the city of Jerusalem, the first thing he wanted to do was to erect a building, a temple to the living God. And it took him a number of years, but eventually he was able to begin it. He never saw it to fruition. His son Solomon was the one who brought it to fruition. And with great solemnity, they brought the Ark of the Covenant up and placed it into the Holy of Holies. Well, we know through history that this Temple of Solomon was not to last, and eventually it was destroyed by invading armies. But then again, Herod, unlike an individual who really was not Jewish, by name only probably, but he was the one who built the second temple, Herod's temple. They made it magnificent. And this is the temple that Jesus and his disciples went to worship every year. This is the temple that shone like a gem atop this mountain. And it was so gilded with gold that when the sun hit it right, you could be miles and miles away and see this bright light shining and flickering at a distance. And to the Jew, that became the center, the focal point of God's presence. Remember, the Jew was not allowed to have statuary or paintings of their God, but they were allowed to have a temple, a place of dwelling. So that when the pagan were to say to them, "Where is your God?" we don't have drawings of our God. We don't have etchings or sculpture of our God. But this is where our God lives. And there was such a mystery, an aura around this temple that people fell down in awe. And here comes this itinerant preacher from a backwater town, says, "One day, not a stone upon a stone shall be left." All this will come to ruin. So you can understand why Jesus got in trouble. Why Jesus got in. If that was one of his the complaints, we heard him say that he's going to destroy the temple in 3 days, rebuild it. That was one of the charges that was brought before him to the high priest. But he wasn't talking about the temple of stone, but rather the temple of his body that was to be raised after his death in 3 days. So the temple was a very, very important part of the psyche of the Jew, the pious Jew, because there dwelled the living God. There was the only place that sacrifice could be offered. And it was there that one day the Messiah would come and vanquish the Romans from their territory, and Israel would once again become the gem of the world. So often we look at things around us, monuments, structure, buildings, whatever they may be, and we think that this will last forever. That this will last forever. And I'm sure one day when, years ago, we looked at the Twin Towers in New York City, people would say, this will last forever. This will be the image that will last forever, even more than the Empire State Building. And we see that nothing lasts forever. We look around us at the magnificent buildings that are built around us, and one day will be built on the very spot in which we worship. And we think that this will last forever. But one day, the building that will stand where we sit tonight will be no more. We listen to the words of St. Paul. We are a pilgrim people. We do not have a lasting city here. And I think that that has to be the hallmark of the Christian, the hallmark of a follower of Christ, that we are itinerant. And like the ancient scriptures tell us, our father was a wandering Aramean, living in tents and traveling and following the herds. We are people who are on the move. We are people who, though set up monuments, great churches, great sanctuaries, we have to realize that one day, even mighty St. Peter's in Rome will come to naught. Because we are a pilgrim people. Jesus tells us over and over again, put your faith and your love where your treasure is. And if your treasure be here on earth, then woe to you, because one day your treasure will not stand. And that's why we place our treasures in heaven, because that's where we are moving to as a pilgrim people. In liturgical architecture, back in the 60s and the 70s, architects were drawing and developing sanctuaries of worship that looked very much like a tent that could be picked up and moved along the way. The mighty structures of pillars and porticos and thrones and all the rest that we see in mighty churches do not reflect a pilgrim people. It reflects a people who are here to stay. But Jesus says that's not where it's at. That's not where we should be. And so, once again, we bring our minds and our hearts back to our own situation. 7 years ago, we came into this building and we thought, thank you, God, we are home at last. Only to find out that we're not. Where do we go? We do not know. Unfortunately, we don't follow flocks anymore who lead us to green pastures. But we must follow the Spirit. We must follow the Spirit to wherever she leads us, and there to pitch our tent once more. Maybe it will be the final place to pitch our tent. Maybe again, it may be temporary, but that's okay, because we are a pilgrim people. We are a people on the move, and we know that our final home resides not here on this earth, but in heaven with the eternal King.